What if you're not frustrated because you're failing, but because you're expecting people who aren't on your journey to celebrate your destination? Think about that. You set a goal, you get excited, you tell the people closest to you, and then hmm, nothing. No excitement, no congratulations, no questions. Maybe they change the subject. Maybe they barely acknowledge it. Maybe they even make a comment that causes you to question whether your goal is even realistic. And something you're suddenly we're excited about, now it starts to feel a little embarrassing. You start wondering, maybe I'm doing too much. Maybe they just don't believe in me. Maybe I'm being unrealistic. And sometimes that hurts when it comes from the people closest to you. Because here's the thing, you expect strangers not to understand you. But when the people who you love don't celebrate what you're building, that hits a little different. But here's what I want you to understand today. Their lack of participation is not necessarily a verdict on your vision. And their lack of applause doesn't mean your accomplishment isn't worth celebrating. Sometimes the people closest to you won't understand the road you're walking. Sometimes they won't have the same ambitions. Sometimes they won't see what you see. And sometimes they simply don't want to be a part of it. And you have to learn how to be okay with that. Because if you need everybody's approval just to keep going, you're not really pursuing your goal. What you're doing is you're pursuing permission. And those are two completely different things. So today, we're going to talk about detaching your goals from other people's validation. We're going to touch on how to celebrate your own wins, how to remain emotionally healthy when people don't show up for you the way you had hoped to, and how to keep moving with faith, discipline, focus, and confidence when that crowd gets quiet. The Double Edge Factor starts right now. This is the Double Edge Factor, where high performance meets peace of mind and faith meets focus. I am your host, Manuel, and peace and blessings unto you. Before we get going, be sure to like, follow, and hit that subscribe button, because the more positive interactions you put out there, the more they push this podcast to people who've never heard it before, which, of course, will allow us to grow, reach new ears, and have a greater impact on more people around the world. Also, the mindset doesn't stop with the conversation. You can wear it too. Visit the Edge collection at Shopify for premium apparel designed for leaders who want to live with purpose. So head on over to rodmanuel.com. That's RODMANUEL.com. Join that email list and remember to like, follow, and subscribe. Okay, let's start here. You cannot measure the value of your progress by someone else's reaction to it. That's one of the hardest lessons to learn, especially when you care about people. Because when you love somebody, you want them to celebrate with you. You want them to say, hey, man, I'm proud of you. You've worked hard on this. I knew you could do it. You deserve this. And then they don't. It can feel a little bit like rejection. But there's a difference between rejection and non-participation. Someone not participating in your goal doesn't automatically mean they're against you. They may not understand it. They may not have the same interests. They may not, they may be dealing with their own struggles. They may not have the capacity to even support you. Or, yes, and sometimes they may genuinely not want to see you succeed. But here's the important part I want you to remember. You don't need to figure out which one it's going to be before continuing. Your responsibility is to stay focused on what you're building. Every ambitious person eventually discovers something a little uncomfortable. You can explain your vision perfectly, and somebody still won't see it. You can show them the business plan, the numbers, the strategy, the potential, and they can still say, I don't know about that. And here's the thing, that's okay. See, vision is difficult to explain to someone who isn't carrying it. So you have to be careful not to spend all of your energy trying to convince people who aren't responsible for the outcome. Sometimes, sometimes the best response isn't another explanation. It's just execution. So let your consistency speak. Let your results speak. And above all else, let your character speak. I want you to imagine you're going back to school at the age of 50 or 52. You tell your friends, and one says, man, you're a little bit too old for that. Another one says, why would you want to do that? Someone else laughs, and suddenly you start to question yourself. But here's the problem. You are asking the people who aren't living your life to approve a decision that affects your life. They don't have to carry the consequences. You do. They don't have to live with the regret of not trying. That's something you have to do. So, why would their opinion be the deciding factor? Now, I say listen to advice, absolutely, but don't confuse advice with authority. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between support and validation. This distinction really matters. You see, support is valuable, validation, that's optional. Let me say that again. Support is valuable, but validation is optional. You should absolutely build relationships with people who encourage you, challenge you, and want to see you grow. But you cannot make their encouragement a requirement for your progress because there will be seasons where you have to move without an applause. There will be seasons where you're building something nobody understands. There will be a season, maybe even two, where you're doing the work alone. And if you only feel confident when somebody else is cheering, you are going to struggle when the room gets quiet. I want you to think about David and his brothers. Before David ever became king, before Goliath, before victories, there was a moment when David's own brothers questioned him. When David arrived at the battlefield and started asking questions about Goliath, his older brothers basically questioned him and his motives. In other words, they were saying, why are you even here? David didn't allow his brother's opinion to redefine his assignment. And that's important because sometimes the people closest to you will have the strongest opinions about what you should and you shouldn't do. And sometimes you have to respectfully hear them without surrendering your direction, of course. David didn't need his brother's permission to step into what he believed he was called to do, and neither should you. That doesn't mean ignore wise counsel. It simply means understand who gets a vote, and not everybody gets a vote on your future. All right, here's where I want to challenge you. If somebody doesn't celebrate your goal, don't automatically make them the villain. I say this instead, because detaching from validation doesn't mean becoming bitter. It doesn't mean saying, hey, they really wasn't my friends in the first place. It doesn't mean cutting everybody off because they didn't repost your announcement. You know, sometimes we expect people to support things they simply don't understand. And sometimes we expect people to show excitement about goals that don't really involve them. And that's not always fair. Here's the thing. You can be disappointed without becoming resentful. You can acknowledge the lack of support without allowing it to position or poison the relationship. Emotional maturity gives you that ability, though. This is something I really want somebody to hear. Learn how to celebrate yourself, not because you don't need people, but because you shouldn't need an audience to acknowledge your progress. If you get that certification, celebrate it. If you paid off that debt, celebrate it. If you lost that weight, celebrate it. You launched that business, celebrate it. You finally had the difficult conversation that you were avoiding, celebrate that. You stayed consistent for 6 months, celebrate that too. Here's the thing, you don't need a parade, but you should stop walking past your own accomplishments like they don't even matter. All right, this part here is just for the fellas. A lot of men are taught to move from accomplishment to accomplishment without ever stopping. You hit a goal, and then you immediately create another one. You get that promotion, then you immediately chase the next title. You make that money, then immediately you start chasing more. And here's the thing. Nothing's wrong with ambition, but if you never stop to acknowledge your progress, you can become addicted to achievement while remaining emotionally disconnected from the accomplishment itself. You see, that's not high performance. That's what I like to call permanent dissatisfaction. High performance should include the ability to recognize your progress. Some of the most important things you'll ever build will happen quietly. Your health, your marriage, your character, your faith, your business, your emotional stability, your discipline. Nobody may see the work. Nobody may even applaud you. But that doesn't make the work less valuable. Some victories we have are just private. And some of the most meaningful victories should be. All right, here's what happens when validation becomes the goal. You start making decisions based on how they'll look, not whether they're right. You choose the career people respect instead of the career that fits your purpose. You buy the things to communicate success instead of building financial stability. You post accomplishments hoping certain people will notice. You pursue relationships because they look good instead of because they're healthy for you. And then you stop asking. You stop asking yourself, is this right for me? And you start asking, will people approve? That, my friends, is a dangerous way to live. Okay, this is one of the most practical things I can tell you. Don't look for everybody's opinion. Build a small circle of wise people. People who know your character, people who understand your goals, and people who aren't afraid to tell you the truth. The people who celebrate your wins without even trying to compete with you. Sometimes you need the people who can tell you that you're wrong and you actually hear what they're saying. You see, you don't need a crowd. What you need is a counsel. What if the clothes you wear reflected the person you're becoming? Welcome to the Edge Collection. More than apparel, it's a mindset. Created for those who choose discipline over excuses, purpose over popularity, and intention over impulse. Every design is a reminder to lead yourself well, pursue excellence without losing your peace, and show up every day with character. Whether you're leading a team, building a business, or becoming the best version of yourself, your clothing should reflect the standards you live by. The Edge Collection isn't just something you wear. It's a statement, a reminder, a lifestyle. Live with intention, lead with purpose, wear your edge. Welcome to the Edge Collection. Here's the hard truth, and hear me when I say this. Growth changes relationships. Not always because something is bad or somebody is bad. Sometimes your direction simply changes. You start prioritizing your health and they don't. You start building a business and they don't. You become better disciplined, but they won't change. You start, participating in certain conversations and they don't understand it. And you know what? That's okay. You can love people without making them responsible for your journey. You can honor your relationships without abandoning your growth as well. I'll say this: never make yourself smaller because someone else is uncomfortable with your growth. But also, don't become so arrogant because you're growing. There's a difference. Confidence says, I'm proud of what I'm building. But arrogance, on the other hand, might say something like, I'm better than you. Confidence celebrates that progress, right? While that arrogance, it starts to need a comparison. You don't need to prove that you're better than anybody. You just need to become better than you were yesterday. What if they never congratulate you? What if they never acknowledge your progress? What if the people that you hope would be there, they're not? And you see, this is where emotional resilience, starts to become real. Can you still smile in that situation? Can you still be grateful? Can you still keep going? Can you celebrate the win without needing them to validate it? You see, that's maturity. And here's something beautiful. Sometimes when you stop demanding celebration, you stop being disappointed by the absence of it. And that, my friends, you'd start to become free. All right, I'll say this. Your life, it cannot be a group project. People can advise you, people can encourage you, people can even challenge you. But ultimately, you have got to live your own life. You got to carry the consequences of that, and you have to live with those decisions. So stop handing people authority that they were never supposed to have. All right, this is what I want you to do this week. Write down 3 goals. Underneath each goal, write, what does it matter to me? Not what will people think, not will people respect me, not will this impress anybody. This is what I want you to do. I want you to ask, why does this matter to me? We'll make that your anchor. Then write down 3 wins that you have had recently. They could be big and they could be small. And then I want you to actually acknowledge them. You don't need social media. You don't need applause. Just start to recognize your own progress. Because here's the thing, if you can't appreciate the journey, you'll constantly be waiting for the destination to make you happy. Here's what I want you to do, and this is what I want you to remember. You don't need everybody to understand the vision. You don't need everybody to participate. You don't need everybody to celebrate. And you definitely do not need everybody's permission. What you need clarity, discipline, faith, consistency, and the emotional maturity to keep moving without becoming bitter when the crowd does not come with you. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the closest people to you won't understand the road that you're walking on. And that's really okay. Just make sure you're not using their lack of participation as an excuse to abandon your potential. So I say, celebrate the wins, honor the progress, stay humble, and stay focused. And with that, I will leave you with today's double-edged message. You cannot depend on other people's enthusiasm, approval, or participation because the people closest to you may not always understand or support the path that you're choosing. The takeaway is to build enough internal confidence, faith, discipline, and emotional resilience to celebrate your own progress, accept wise counsel without surrendering your own direction, and keep moving toward your goals without becoming bitter when others don't come along. That is it for today. If this episode challenged or even inspired you, take the message with you. Visit the Edge Collection on Shopify for premium apparel created for leaders, achievers, and people who choose to live with intention every day. And if this episode added value, clarity, or even one push, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember to head on over to rodmanuel.com. That's RODMANUEL.com, where you will find resources, coaching tools, and more to help you live, lead, and perform at your highest level. And as I always say, be intentional with your words, be intentional with your thoughts, and be intentional with your actions. And always find a way to be a blessing to someone else today.